All right, SPQR fans and Victorum Gaming fans, we're back. We're with another scenario video here that we're going to cover, and this is the second in our series of 3 for the Athenians. And again, these are these missions that are themed for the different factions, which, if you're playing a campaign that does come into play. But also, if you're just playing heads up for fun or whatever, you don't necessarily have to have one of the people be Athenian. You can sort of tweak the mission to whatever you guys are playing. And again, in that sense, the game is really cool just because you have so many different scenarios to play. So really, you really should rarely play like the same kind of game twice. But anyway, so this one is called Strategic Conquest, and again has a attacker defender here, and again. Warbands of equal size, and the Athenians are the attacker again here. And interesting to note, right? The Athenians have a fairly small deployment zone. You are 18 inches away from the defender, so depending on what the defender has, or whatever you have as the Athenians, there is a potential for a turn one charge if both of them are kind of like lined up against the edges of their deployment zone. But the defender definitely has basically twice the deployment size here, so pretty hefty. Would have been nice if they would have indicated just a little bit more on like what the actual dimensions should be for like how far up. But you can kind of figure that out if you assume it's a 4-foot table and kind of work off of that. But basically, the defenders have twice the area that the Athenians do. So, setup. The defending player rolls 1 dice. He must select this many pieces of terrain that will become objectives for the Athenians. These pieces of terrain may be anywhere on the table, but the same piece can't be selected twice. The defending player then deploys all of his models, followed by the Athenian player. The Athenian player has the first phase. So, lots of things to take in there. So, and basically, as we'll see, the point of the game is for the Athenians to basically take and hold these various scenario pieces, and then the defenders basically trying to kill off enough of the Athenian units so that they can't hold enough to win. So that being said, the defender, you probably shouldn't be putting buildings in the Athenian zone. That just seems kind of silly. So you definitely would probably be putting these back in your own deployment zone. Make it take as long as possible for the Athenians to get there and hold them. There probably should be some sort of restrictions here, though, as far as like putting buildings or terrain up against like a table edge or something like that. There should probably be just a couple of tweaks to where things can go. Normally it says like certain things can't be within a certain distance of each other, stuff like that. But we really don't get any of that here. So again, there probably could be a little bit more work done on this, tweaking the setup, maybe some house rules or whatever. And then the other things to take into consideration. So you as the defender do get to place all those terrain pieces. You do have to set up first, so you kind of want to probably get those tied together in your mind as far as like, well, where am I putting the terrain, and what units are going to be best to go with wherever that is on the field. And you're basically going to be putting all your cards on the table first, because again, you're placing those terrain pieces and then you're placing your whole army first. So you really got to get two things kind of planned in one here. The Athenians will get to deploy afterwards. Now, again, they do have a smaller zone, but that doesn't necessarily hamper them. Now, a little bit more of an advanced play, which maybe doesn't seem immediately obvious. You could, depending on what you roll, put one or more of the terrain pieces in the Athenian deployment zone A, just to mess with how they get to deploy their army depending on the size of those terrain pieces. And that would also force them to keep a couple of their units back to control those terrain pieces. So that could be a strategy, but that definitely is a little bit riskier. So might not be for the less experienced player playing as the defenders. But if you play as they kind of have like a picture here, like a big old temple in the Athenian deployment zone, which is already very small, that's just that much less space for them to deploy. So it kind of forces them to maybe have a rougher deployment setup, which can then maybe help you as the defender. So, and again, if I were the defender, I would certainly, any buildings I put in my zone there, I would certainly spread them out just to make it take as long as possible for the Athenians to take as much as possible. And then the other factor to consider is, after having said all that, the Athenians do get to go first. They're going to start moving turn one and be on you, basically. But again, the further you keep the buildings away from them, assuming you put them in your zone, that gives you some time. Hopefully you bring some missile troops and stuff like that just to whittle their numbers down. Anyway, moving on. Special rules. The Athenian player will capture a terrain piece selected by the defending player by moving a unit into contact with it. It will remain in his possession until all Athenian units in contact with it have moved away or been destroyed. So yeah, so basically you just have to be in base contact with it. A good strategy for the Athenian player here would be to take maybe multiple small units too, just to take and hold those pieces, and then like have the combat units really move on. So some like bow armed troops or something like that that are still fairly cheap can hold those terrain pieces while the like the hoplites move up, for example. Victory conditions: Athens will gain a victory if it manages to capture at least half of the terrain pieces selected by the defending player. It doesn't say anything about rounding up or rounding down here, so maybe something that would need to be agreed upon. I would probably round up here just to make it a little bit more challenging. The defending player will win. Let's see. If he can make it impossible for the Athenian player to do this by destroying enough Athenian units so half can't be captured. And I don't think it says that here, but basically, assuming two terrain pieces aren't too close together, really, it should only be that one unit can capture one terrain piece at a time, not multiple. So that's just fair, and really should just be included in the rules somewhere there. But yeah, so it's a pretty neat mission. Definitely involves some interesting concepts here, and the fact that, again, the defender gets to place these key pieces of terrain too definitely add some variety to the mission. So even if you play it multiple times, it should be a little bit different each time too. And like I said, you have some interesting options there as the defender. You certainly have a generous amount of space to deploy in, so you can definitely try to make things as difficult as possible for your opponent. And then the Athenians do have a little bit of an uphill battle here, and again, that smaller deployment zone, can't necessarily always bring the full might of their army to bear, just because they do have to leave some units behind to hold on to those terrain pieces. So, but yeah, really interesting scenario. Definitely good overall. Just needs a couple of tweaks and some clarifications, I would say. But again, you can house rule that stuff. So yeah, Strategic Conquest. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit us with a like and a subscribe if you haven't already, and then stay tuned for more content.